Now join palms and repeat after me. I take refuge in the Buddha.
I take refuge in the Buddha.
I take refuge in the Dharma.
I take refuge in the Dharma.
I take refuge in the Sangha.
I take refuge in the Sangha.
Keeping the palms joined. Put palms down. All right, good evening, everybody. Welcome to Dharma Bum Temple. Y'all planned to be here this evening. Nobody dragged you here against your will. No. Why are you here? What would bring you to a place like this on a Tuesday night?
I didn't RSVP for the recovery downstairs.
Well,
But I love my Sangha and I really love to sit with
good to sit with you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Al?
Practice meditation. I work better in a group.
Yeah,
Not alone.
for sure.
And it's pleasant.
Yeah. What else? Why show up?
Just to participate was a bit of a discussion maybe, and it always gives me new perspectives and ways of thinking about things.
Yeah. For some reason, the way we've been thinking about things for so long hasn't always worked,
Right.
you know? So sometimes it's good to listen to others' views on things and see what works. What else? Anybody? Anyone have difficulty with anything today? Nobody? Phenomenal. That's great. No challenges at all. That's nice.
I was rushing all day. I'm a hairstylist, so my first client was late and it just cascades all day. And so I had a really hard time catching my breath, being present, or eating.
Yeah.
And then I rushed here.
Yeah.
But it was nice to sit for a few minutes before you came in.
Sure. Yeah, I would imagine, I've never done it other than shaving my own, but I would imagine styling hair is it's really a great Zen practice.
Very personal as well.
Yeah. It's also something you probably don't want to rush too much.
There's corner doesn't cut.
Yeah.
Not literally.
There's a great teaching on just learning to be present with whatever you're doing. And so this practice really is about understanding whatever I'm doing in this moment, this is my practice. And very often we think with meditation or Buddhism that there's something outside of what we're doing that is our practice. Meaning we rush around doing stuff all day long, and then we think, okay, now I'm going to go to my Buddhist thing or go to my meditation thing. And the practice is really understanding that you were just in your opportunities to practice all day long. And so we work on trying to understand how can we bring what we learn through meditation and Buddhist teachings into everything that we're doing, to where we eventually just kind of close the gap, to where there's no separation between your everyday life and the practice. That's not always so easy, but once we begin to recognize that the difficulties and challenges that we're facing all day long, that those are the things that bring us to a place like this to begin with, we eventually realize that, or I hope we realize that there's really deep understanding and I think deep wisdom in recognizing that your day-to-day struggles are where this practice is needed the most. So when we come to places like this, it tends to be a little bit easier. You know, people are typically nice to you and pleasant to you, usually. You know, it's kind of that warm feeling that we often seek and crave all day long. And it's because we use this as an escape. And so what I'm really talking about is recognizing that once we stop using meditation, Buddhist practice, Buddhist places, yoga practices, things like that as the escape, and we come back to hopefully building a life to where we feel like we don't have to escape from anything, then we've kind of made this seamless transition from the separation of your daily life and your Buddhist thing. That makes sense? So, and if you give it about, 8 to 10 years, you should be there, no problem. So you're close, you know, we'll all get there eventually. All right, so with that, we'll start a meditation practice. A couple things to tell you before we begin. Nothing's going to happen to you. Right? You're not going to float away. You won't have any mystical, magical experiences. The mind that races all day long is not going to shut off. Don't judge your practice, meaning don't ask yourself, is it working or not working? Am I doing it right? Am I doing it wrong? We're just going to sit. We're going to breathe. You'll hear sounds inside the room, sounds outside. This is life. Life is filled with chaos. And this practice is learning to get quiet and still within all of the chaos. All right? Posture, if you're on a cushion, often it helps slide into the front third, pushing the stomach forward. Allows the back to straighten, shoulders are relaxed, hands can be on the knees or in the lap, whatever is comfortable. If you're on a bench or a chair, also just sitting up straight, relaxing the shoulders. Again, hands are on the knees or in the lap, whatever is comfortable. I will guide us as we begin, and we will settle into a little bit of silence. Again, most important, do not expect anything but to sit and breathe. And starting with the eyes closed if comfortable, or slightly open. Mouth is open or closed, whatever's comfortable. Start with taking 3 deep breaths, slowly. And eventually, settle into a natural rhythm of the breath. Noticing the mind as it wanders, jumping from thought to thought. Start with gently guiding the attention, focus to the stomach or chest. Breathing in, feel them rise. Breathing out, they fall. Simply continue this practice, observing sensation of breath. And as the mind wanders, lost in thought, recognize it, release that thought, return attention, focus to the breath. letting go of expectations, letting go of judgment from the practice, just sitting, breathing. Keeping the mind alert, aware of each sound, each thought, each physical sensation. Yet concerned with nothing but sitting, breathing. And with the body still, rested, and the speech quiet, aware of all sounds, and the mind learning to settle. Know what it's like to just sit and breathe. Knowing with each breath, there's nothing else to do. Nowhere else to go. No one else to be. Everything beautiful, exactly as it is. Sitting, breathing, once again, taking 3 deep breaths slowly. And as you slowly open the eyes, slowly beginning to move, and most important, with the practice of meditation, is to recognize how you feel now, immediately after. Compare this to how you typically feel throughout your day. Recognize the difference, if there is one. Ask yourselves how you prefer to feel every day for the rest of your life. And realize however you feel now, if it's quiet, calm, and still, or a busy mind, racing mind, whatever you're sitting with at this moment, it's nothing to do with anything I said. It's nothing to do with how we sit and hold the hands or cross the legs. It's nothing to do with the sounds around us or anything else for that matter. It's everything to do with your own mind and your own mind's reaction to an external condition. This is what the Buddha called pratitya samuppada, means dependent origination. This is the basis of the Buddha's awakening. The word Buddha simply means awakened. He was a human being no different than any one of us. He began to understand why he suffered, why he got angry, sad, depressed, stressed, anxious. He began to understand the causal relationship of all phenomena. And what that means very simply for all of us, regardless of where you come from or what you believe in and where you think you're going, your whole life is filled with things that happen. You react. More things happen, more reactions. That's it. That's what we get. This practice is learning what it's like to respond to something quietly, peacefully, still. Because for most of us, the way we responded to the last 20 minutes is quite different from how we respond to everything else that's happening throughout our days. So all we're working on is closing the gap to where the way you feel now is closer to how you feel always. Just as driven, motivated, productive, successful, whatever that means to you in your respective lives. But with a mind that's steady, clear, focused, distracted by nothing, disturbed by no one. Meditation is not an escape. It's direct perception into the present moment. And very often, as we know all too well throughout our days, the present moment can be very difficult. And meditation is learning to be present with everything as it arises. The good and the bad, as we call it. We label things as pleasant and unpleasant. And this practice is learning to be with those things as they arise. Meditation is free. Buddhist practice free. Sitting, breathing, learning to be kind to yourself and everybody else you encounter every moment of your life. And that's why it's such a simple practice. All you have to do is roam around and be nice to everybody all day long. You can do that, right? I mean, really? How hard could it be? Just be nice to people. It's so difficult for some reason. You know what that reason is? Anyone know why it's so hard to be nice to people all day long?
Social media.
Social media, sure, but even more than that. People don't do all day long or say all day long or post all day long what we want them to. So the real solution to the practice is just to figure out how you can get everyone in the world to do everything exactly how you want them to. That's the shortcut. If you can figure that out, then you're golden.
The world.
I'm sorry?
You got like key to the world.
You got the key to the world. But unfortunately, it's never going to work that way. And so what we're really looking for, instead of the key to the world, is the key to finding that inner peace within yourself. And the way to do that is to learn to be with, the Buddha called it dukkha, the suffering, discomfort, angst, dissatisfaction. So just in case you go through your day and some people don't do or say or post everything you want them to, you are learning the tools to be okay with that. And therefore, you're learning the tools to be okay with yourself. Because nobody else causes our suffering. They do things, we respond to it, and our response and our reaction is our suffering. And the beauty of this is we begin to recognize with practice that we gain, or we have full ability and control over how we choose to physically, mentally, and emotionally respond to people. But that's the hard part, that's the practice. Is continuously working on and recognizing, how am I responding in these situations? And when we respond to situations with greed or anger or ignorance, then things tend to not work out so well. This is the cause of our suffering, as the Buddha taught, the greed, the anger, the ignorance. So if we respond to people with greed and anger and ignorance, then we create more conflict, more problems. We overcome greed with generosity, anger with compassion, ignorance with wisdom. So the practice, very simply, is to respond to each and every moment with generosity, compassion, and wisdom. And if we can do that, then we will bring less suffering to ourselves and less suffering to others. So, but as I will always say, this is a practice. This isn't a 6-week course. It's not something you do for 3 months and all of a sudden you're like, okay, I got it. I'm ready. Where's the advanced stuff? It's just doing this simple, basic practice over and over and over again every day. Because the simple, basic practice is hard enough. Right? So, with that, I'll pause. I always prefer really just to respond to questions, meditation, Buddhist practice, anything that you're sitting with. And I'll use the rest of the time to respond to your questions. So, yes, sir.
Boy, do I have questions.
We only got about 20 minutes, so I'm not sure how much I can help you.
I want your help.
Yes, sir.
So, I'm a teacher, and I have a reputation for creating what's called safe harbor classrooms.
Okay.
So a student becomes dysregulated in their regular classroom. Conflict with the teacher, whatever, something may be wrong at home, that got triggered, and they bolt out of the classroom, they're going to leave campus and go do something they shouldn't be doing.
Right.
So my door is always open, no questions asked. I don't care if it's a teacher, I don't care if it's a student, it just gets you in a safe place.
Okay.
It's an escape.
Yeah.
All right, it's temporary. I tell the students that you can't do, I can't help you, you can't really help because there's a kid, there's chaos and dysfunction in this world that we don't have any control over. But what we can control is how we interact in this space right here.
Yes.
You know, the bell rings, I send them back out there. It's like a microcosm of what we're doing right here. Right
That's
now.
100% what we're doing.
So my question is, you used the term escape, it hit me harshly.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna stop there and let you take it. I'm handing it off. to you.
Sure. No, it's a great question. I'll try to rephrase it just for our millions of YouTube followers here. I don't need details. I don't want details, and I know you wouldn't share details, but just to give me some context, is it high school, middle school? High school, okay. So the question, if I understand it correctly, or the kind of the comment is, you're a teacher, high school, and you run a safe harbor classroom where when a conflict arises with a student, maybe with other students or a teacher, this safe harbor classroom is a place for them to go to. Doors always open so they can come and kind of simmer down, and and they use it as an escape. And that way, hopefully, well, you didn't say this, I'm But so that's what you're pointing out. And what I referenced earlier is that I always, often, you've heard me say this enough now, reference Buddhist practice in a place like this, which is exactly like what you're describing, as an escape. But I often introduce it in a way, and you said it hit you harshly. And the way I introduce it, I completely understand, and these are my words, not yours, how it could be taken in like this negative context, right? And so the question or comment is like, okay, if this is a safe place and that's a safe place, yet I'm calling this escape, and again, I'm using my words now, is that a bad thing? I'm kind of putting my words onto this. Is that fair enough to say?
Right there.
Okay. Not at all. Not a negative thing, not a bad thing. It's incredibly important, right? So to start with, when I reference a place like this as an escape, right? And you said when the bell rings or whenever they're done, then they go. And when they walk out the door, they're on their own, right? You have no control over what happens, right? You can't follow them. That would probably get you in a lot of trouble, right? So they're on their own. It's exactly like here, right? I have no idea what you're all going to go do when we leave here, thankfully, right? But chances are, hopefully, if you have chosen, and I'll come back to the escape part, if you were in conflict in your life and you're having a bad day and you've chosen to escape to a place like this, beautiful. Because you need it, just like the kids need it. But the practice is to ultimately recognize, right, that what if we could reach a place in our lives where we don't have to escape, right? I've worked with in and out of high schools for 25 years with correctional facilities for juveniles, you name it. I've been there. And court schools in San Diego, high school kids, they need that. Because if they are sent out on their own, the damage and destruction that they're going to create is severe, okay? Now, that might not be much different from the damage or destruction people in here might create. Hopefully it's not potentially the same, but we may cause damage or destruction in our life or in the lives of somebody else just with what we say or how we respond, which could be very different from maybe a troubled teen. Hopefully there's a maturity level here, hopefully, right, that isn't there. So we need these escapes. But that's just a starting point, right? I use the metaphor a lot of Advil or Tylenol. If we have a headache, we pop 2 Advil, hope the headache goes away. Next day we have a headache again, we take 2 more Advil, we hope the headache goes away. Next thing you know, we're spending our entire lives popping Advil to get rid of headaches. But the real practice is, what's causing the headache to begin with? And can we create a life that we don't get headaches anymore? So we don't need the Advil. But let's take the Advil while we can. Let's use the Safe Harbor Classroom while we can. Let's use the Dharma Bum Temple as an escape while we can. Because we kind of need that light, the raft. Now I'm like giving too many metaphors, but is it making sense so far? Definitely not negative. And when I point out, and I'm glad you bring this up for anybody else, when I point out that we use this as an escape, the purpose isn't to have you think like, oh yeah, my life sucks. I'm escaping to that place. I should stop going there. No, it's to recognize that if you think your life sucks, why? Because it probably doesn't suck nearly as bad as you think it does, right? Whatever conflict the kids are having, to them, it's a huge ordeal. But in the big picture, in the grand scheme of things, they'll get through it most likely. And if they're not careful and they act on that emotion at that moment, then it's going to be an even bigger deal. Thus the reason the Safe Harbor Classroom is there. So does that help? Good. I try. I brought my head game. I try. High school kids working with, that's an incredible practice, an incredible place, and such an opportunity to have a positive influence on youth. I think bringing it back to here, it's for all of us to recognize. And again, when I say like recognize like why you're suffering, it's not meant to be a miserable, depressing thing, but to recognize that we're human. And as we're human, we're going to have, my brother, my friend, can you, 2 things. 1, perfect. There you go, 2 for 2. Thank you, I appreciate it. As we go through our days, we're going to have sadness and anger and depression and stress and anxiety. That's the human experience. And so I talk about that a lot because Buddhist practice is about moving through that. But if we don't become aware of it, right, how can we move through it? So again, coming back to the classroom, the kid has to recognize, oh yeah, I'm in a pretty dangerous place right now. I better go there before I go do something even worse. So, yeah. Thank you. Other questions? Yeah.
I had a question about, is it Koans?
Koans, yes.
So I know they're not supposed to, you can't really think about them in a logical sense because they don't make sense in a way, at least like the way our brains work analytically, but how do you practice with them or what do you do with them?
That's a funny question. Any other questions? Meditation, Buddhist practice. So, I mean, like that response, I want it to go on record. Ignoring your question and moving on to the next question was the best response I could give you. Probably not the response you wanted.
That's kind of what
Oh, it's what you expected?
well, if you would have answered it, I would have like, if you answered it, come here.
Oh, good. So you have some knowledge of them
Yeah.
to recognize that there is no answer to that question. So now let's have the like dumbed down version. Not that that wasn't the dumbed down version, but let's have an even like, for those who aren't familiar, in Zen practice, right, in the Rinzai Buddhist practice, one of the schools of Buddhism, 2 major ones that survived are Soto and Rinzai. And there's what's called Koans, K-O-A-N. And these practice, as you're saying, as you kind of introduced it, which is great because you introduced koans as an intellectual thing. And then you said you can't really answer them. And then you asked an intellectual question about koans that can't really be answered, which is why I just completely moved on from it. But to just bring it to light for everybody is that these are questions that a Zen student, which we are not, would ask a Zen teacher, which I am not, the Zen teacher would provide a koan for the Zen student, and which is not happening here, right? Not students, not teachers. But the idea is that these are questions that they may or may not have answers to them, but whatever your answer is, you're pretty much going to be wrong, right? And they're meant to really, it's a beautiful practice. They're meant to really, I feel, help the unenlightened, analytical, intellectual mind that we all have on some levels, recognize that we're probably just wrong. But we spend all day long trying to figure things out, right? All day, everything. And because we spent, centuries and centuries and centuries trying to figure things out and failed miserably, they created these things and Google to help us figure things out. And so now we can really figure it out because we have Google, right? We want to go somewhere. We have a map that tells us where to go, right?
Thank God.
Thank God, all right? Get lost sometime. That's the point, right? The point is to free the mind from this box that we live in of thinking things are this way or that way. But because we always want to find the exact problem or solution to the problem, we always want to get exactly where we're going, we're very restricted. And that really hinders us from experiencing what actually is happening. So it's a Zen question, and for me, that's really what I study the most in my background. And the beautiful practice I have found with that is to work on having zero expectations from anyone or anything ever. So it would kind of be like driving around lost your whole life. But because there's nowhere to be, you're not lost at all. You're actually exactly where you're supposed to be, which is right there, here, now. And the koans are there to help you, I feel, understand, not get the answer right, but to understand how we're so wrapped up in thinking we're right all the time. You know? You ever get into an argument? When you're in the argument, do you think you're right?
Sometimes.
Sometimes you argue even when you know you're wrong, right? Just to see if you can win the argument.
Yeah.
That's even more fun. It's like, I'm going to argue with it because I'm right, and then all of a sudden realize, like, no, wait, I'm wrong, but let me see if I can still win the argument.
Right.
You know, because then the ego's fed even more. It's like, wow, I was wrong and I won the argument. That was fantastic. Almost to where we backed ourselves into thinking that we were actually right. Our entire life is this way, thinking that we are correct. Every conflict, right? In every relationship, every dynamic, everything is about our view versus somebody else's view. And so koans are really help, I believe, are there to help shatter that. And yeah, nothing to do, nowhere to go, everything beautiful, not even beautiful, just everything as it is. So, yeah. Hope that helps you ponder. Yeah. Yeah. And if you're not familiar with koans, you can Google it. Seriously though, they're quite fascinating. Yeah. Other thoughts, questions? Yeah.
Yeah, I was thinking about, like, I guess it's kind of like a broad just thought, or like all I could just, but like with attachment, I think I just like recognize like some things are easier to kind of start implementing day to day, and this is one I recognize I struggle with so much.
Yes.
I guess just kind of like you have some like general thoughts on it.
Sure. So the Buddhist teaching on what's non-attachment is understanding that all conditioned phenomena, every person, place, and thing, and this is just kind of a recap for anyone who might be new, comes together for a period of time and then ceases to exist. And this is the Buddhist teachings on impermanence. And so the deeper that we have the ability to understand impermanence and put it into our lives, the, dare I say, easier it is to work with non-attachment. It is, I don't know if I'd call it I don't know that there's really one thing or practice that is the most difficult, but of all the list of difficult Buddhist practices and things to really embody into your life, non-attachment is it. It's tough, which is what you're pointing out. So I'm just repeating really what you shared for everybody else's, I guess, benefit that might not understand it. And then your question, or really what you're sharing, is any tips on how to deal with it, right? So let me first say a couple things again in general, is that non-attachment, for those who don't, or have never heard this or not aware of it, doesn't mean that you don't care. It doesn't mean that it's not, often you hear the people say unattached or detached. It's not detached. Detached is very much a cutting off of. It's not unattached. It's non-attached. And non-attachment is actually a really deep love and care with tremendous amount of wisdom. So to be non-attached is to completely love something or someone or somewhere in that moment for what it is or who it is, knowing that they'll be gone at some point in time. It will be gone at some point in time. This is just reality. So impermanence is important in understanding non-attachment, and understanding that non-attachment doesn't mean we don't care. Now, the question of now what, right? So, okay, great, Jeff. So now what do I do with that? Start with simple things, as if there are any. And I'm going to rattle off some of the things you've been hearing me talk about for a while. The simple things that we are attached to that maybe we could work on not attaching so much that wouldn't break our hearts, okay? Do you have a couple favorite shirts? Okay, so let's say you have 5. And I'm just giving you random examples, and you can pick and choose and play along as little or as much as you like. When you get home tonight, whatever, I want you to take out your top 5 favorite shirts. I'm actually going easy on you because you pointed out how difficult it is. Normally, I would say take your favorite shirt and give it away. Take out your top 5 favorite shirts and pick 2 of them, right? You're still getting to keep 60% of your greatest shirts. You're only giving away 40% of them, which is less than half. That's like nothing. And I want you to take your 2 least favorite of your 5 favorites and give them to someone who needs them. It'll hurt a little bit. It's silly to think about this, but it really will. It's like, well, that's my favorite shirt. I like how I look when I wear it. I feel good when I wear it. I spent a lot of money on it. I remember buying it. It has some sentimental value. The sentimental ones will probably stay in the top 60%. The 40% ones, maybe not so much. So watch your mind as you decipher what goes into being the top 5, and then what goes into being the 60% you keep and the 40% you get rid of. It's crazy how the mind attaches to things. When people talk about non-attachment with loved ones, family, friends, animals, things like that, that's so hard. Start with clothes. Something we're very much attached to, but that you won't miss the rest of your life, hopefully. Because if you do miss that shirt the rest of your life, then you might as well just surrender on trying to work on non-attachment to loved ones, right? Another great practice is food. And again, I know you've heard me give these examples, but for anybody, we're so attached to expecting to get what we want, right? When you go to a restaurant, you order food. You look at a menu for 5-10 minutes. These days with the pandemic, it's probably takeout, more likely, whatever it is. You spend forever looking at the menu, you order it, you want to be served or brought or delivered exactly what you ordered. And if you don't get exactly what you ordered, then it's just not fun, okay? So we're so attached to what we get to eat. I was talking about this just earlier today with somebody, that when the Buddha went begging for alms, they would put the head down, they'd put the bowl up, and food went in it. They were beggars. They were homeless, wandering beggars. So when they gathered back together to sit down and eat, they didn't look at it and be like, you know what, I don't want this. I'm going to send it back, right? They were just grateful for the ability to have food. And they ate whatever was there because it gave them the nourishment to be alive. So the practice is next time you order food, if you go to a restaurant or whatever, and it's going to be kind of hard with Uber Eats, but wherever you go, if you're a vegetarian, if you're gluten-free, whatever your dietary restrictions are, just say to somebody, hey, I want to spend $10 and I want it to be vegetarian and I want anything on the menu. If you're allergic, then leave out whatever you're allergic to. And what's going to happen is food's going to show up in front of you and it won't kill you. And it will satisfy the basic need of nutrition. Is it what you desire? No. But the Buddha said that our desires cause suffering. And when we don't get what we desire, we suffer. Is it what you were craving to eat? No. But the Buddha said craving is the cause of suffering. We crave things constantly to be the way we want it to, right? Is it going to be what we are attached to with the food? No, because maybe we go to a restaurant and we expect the same thing every time and it's our favorite. So maybe we can practice non-attachment towards food, you know? Food and clothes are the two, I think, best things to start practicing non-attachment. And if nothing else, you'll realize, or it will potentially drive home even more how difficult this is. You know? So, can you try one or both of those and report back?
I will.
Yes, absolutely. So, yeah, non-attachment is tough because we're raised to have expectations our whole lives and cravings and desires our whole lives. And, you know, then the greatest attachment is to the sense of self. And everything stems from that, right? This is me, this is my experience, this is my view, this is my lens, and you're all just in my world. And the challenge and the danger is that every one of us is doing that exact same thing all day long, right? We all just go through our days from our own lens and our own perceptions. And we expect the world to just kind of meet us there. But they're doing the same thing. So that attachment to the self and that ego is really tough. So, yeah. Anything else before we close? Any final question?
The monks still beg. We're not beg, but
Yeah,
still
that's
beg.
begging. Oh, definitely begging. Yeah, go ahead.
They still do that, yeah.
Yeah, so the question was, do monks still beg? All Buddhist traditions and lineages are different, but the tradition of begging for food and going on alms rounds absolutely still exists. Again, each tradition, each location will be different. Just north of here in Escondido at Thai Forest Monastery, it's a monastery that run by Thanissaro Bhikkhu Ajahn Jeff. It's Theravadan practice, and they live basically by the Vinaya, which is the code of conduct and the ethics and the guidelines that the Buddha and the initial Sangha lived by, which included morning alms rounds and eating once a day. So they still go out and practice alms. So that tradition very much exists. Other monasteries, say maybe a Mahayana Buddhist temple, maybe doesn't walk the streets doing it, but food will be offered there to them and brought to them. So it varies. I always have to say this just out of respect for my dear friend who is a master in Taiwan. He grew up here, 20-something years, UCSD graduate, became a monk, moved to a monastery in Taiwan, and then left that after 15 years, started his own temple there. And so I said to him, Master Huiguang, are you ever going to come back to America to teach Buddhism? It's where he grew up here. And he said, I'd love to, but I'd starve. Meaning that the way Buddhist practice is approached in the Western world is very different from over there. So there's that element as well. That idea of, imagine if you just saw monks roaming up and down the street begging for food. It's very different, So, yeah.
Well, I was thinking along with that question. Sounds true, but why can't they just get a job or offer services instead of just begging?
They do offer service. So it comes from, and many of them had jobs, right? So the Buddha had a job. He was a prince. And his path was to be a king and to rule and to live a life filled with greed, anger, and ignorance and to kill. And he said, I'm going to renounce and I'm going to take a spiritual path, which is free from the material world that we are used to.
But someone's gonna pay for his food.
Yes, and in return, as a reciprocal relationship, the Buddha and the monks and nuns provided spiritual practice for the people who showed up. And what they got back was all they needed to live, which was food. That's it. It's important to understand that when they were providing them food, right? They weren't giving them money for them to go buy like iPhones and, you know. So what was given to them was basic bare bone necessities. It was like, look, we have chosen a spiritual path. And again, this is India 2,500 years ago, which was very common to be kind of that yogi spiritual lifestyle, where they're going to renounce all of that stuff. So the reciprocal relationship was really beautiful that said, look, we're all struggling house dwellers. We have families and kids and we're struggling and we're seeking spiritual support. So they sought out the monks for spiritual guidance. But the spiritual guidance came from monks who had left the material world. And all they needed to live, again, I'm repeating myself, but all they needed was food. And that was it. So the other thing is, it really became a beautiful practice, and I'll close with this thought, for the people, right? Like to me, going up to a place like Metaforest, or anywhere for that matter, being able to provide meals or any sort of material needs to the monks and nuns, it's like one of the greatest things. Because they've dedicated their lives to such a deep spiritual practice. And in turn, their work is to care for the community, 100%. That's their work. Their jobs are to be spiritual guides to those people who show up, you know?
What do they like the best?
Say again?
What do they like the most? If I would go up to Deer Park and take strawberries or something, what would really
I cannot speak for anybody else. Yeah, I don't know.
chocolate?
Yeah, I mean, you'd have to ask them. But I think it's important to understand that, and I'll close with this thought, and I just always come back to these examples because, you know, and it was only 11 months, but living in a monastery setting with monks and nuns, they're the hardest working people I've ever seen in my entire life. And they're just paid back very differently. They're not getting money to go buy stuff, right? They spend probably about 17, 18 hours a day making sure that the monastery is cared for in every way, meaning that the people who show up there are cared for. So we're not monks and nuns here, right? But it's the same thing, right? Those of us who lead, again, we're not monks or nuns, but somebody has to provide spiritual guidance and support. We'd all be staring at a wall. Maybe you'd be better off. So, yeah, good stuff. So I'll close on that. Join palms. May the benefit of this practice be shared with all beings in all directions. May all beings be at peace. May all be free from suffering. May any merit gained from this practice be transferred to the more than 4 million lives that have been lost during this pandemic, and to the family and friends who suffer at this time. May they all be at peace. May we all be at peace and free from suffering. So thank you all for being here. A couple quick announcements. My name is Jeff. I'm a Dharma bum. We opened up this temple 15 years ago to introduce Buddhist practice to those who show up. Those of us who lead, as I said, we're not monks, we're not nuns, we're not gurus, we're not masters, we're not teachers, we're not looking for students, we're just practitioners. We do our best to take our understanding of Buddhist teachings and put it into terms that hopefully make sense to those who show up. So just about every night we have different practices going on. For 16 months we closed due to the pandemic. So about half our schedule is in person and probably less than half, and the rest is virtual. We meet here in person Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday nights and Saturday morning. And then our recovery sangha, anyone battling addiction, drugs, alcohol, or anything for that matter, Sunday morning is here and Tuesday night is downstairs. Other than that, we appreciate you all being here. We appreciate you continuing to kind of follow the guidelines as we've slowly reopened the last couple months. It's just nice to be able to be open at all. So thanks for being here. Thanks for your intention. And please be safe. Good luck with your clothes and food. And have fun being nice to everybody else you encounter the rest of tonight. Good luck.
You guys have a schedule like online?
It is online, yeah, definitely.
Awesome.
Yeah, thanks, man. Appreciate it. Good to see you guys. Thanks for being here. Thank you. Good luck. Yes, sir. Let me just shut this off real quick. All right.